Here.
The mayor is here.
Sorry.
Councilmember Dodson.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Councilmember Rigney.
Here.
Thank y'all for being here. We have a lot on the agenda, so we had scheduled for 4:30, knowing that we would have to start whenever we finished the crime control board of directors meeting, which we just did, so we're starting a little after that. But I think we can get through it. So we're going to go right into it. So the Enterprise Fleet Management Program is first on the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. Adrienne Lothry, Assistant City Manager, and I have with me tonight Jennifer from Enterprise Fleet Management. She and I and Mark have been sitting down with lots of conversation to really make sure we understand the concept, and want to share that with you all. This was something that we thought was important to look at as a part of our budget discussions, and some of you may be familiar and some of you may not with how the general concept works. So I'm going to spend some time just talking about how their program works and why it's something that we're interested in looking at. And then we've got some kind of examples on a more individualized basis that may help some of those bigger picture things sink down in a more concrete way. So we'll try to move through this fairly quickly, but feel free to stop us along the way as usual with questions, and we'll either say we've got that coming up or we'll address it right there. So we'll move as fast as y'all are ready. So Enterprise Fleet Management has been around for quite some time, but with any kind of new concept or new program that's become popular amongst cities, I personally always tend to be one of the skeptics of, oh gosh, well let's see it prove out as a successful case in a few other cities before we actually get that interested. So I've been familiar with this for a number of years, and kind of heard other people are kicking the tires on it, but it's really become in the last year or so that it seems that a lot of folks have begun to sign on and really understand and appreciate this concept. And these are all the cities that Enterprise Fleet Management currently works with. A lot of our neighbors work with them. Bedford, Keller, Prosper, Haltom City, a lot of folks. And we're going to talk a little bit later in the presentation, but the city of Prosper and the city of Keller are unique in that they've gone a certain path with this program that's cash funded, which is what we would be looking at doing, whereas a lot of these other cities that have participated under the EFM program are doing so in a more traditional lease model as opposed to where we cash fund all of our vehicles. So just a little bit of a difference there. So we're familiar, we talk about every year in our budget process that we have typical replacement schedules. We replace computers every so often, we replace vehicles every so often. They've all kind of got their own criteria. So typically with fleet, at least in terms of City of Colleyville, we've done so at generally like in every 100,000 mile or 10-year marker. And if we've got one that's giving us problems, we might look at replacing it a little bit sooner. Or if it's running okay, we may say, you know what, it's got another year in it. We'll hold on to it for a little bit longer. And that's what I would consider, and as we've discussed, a very traditional city model. In lean years, there's always the opportunity to pull back on your capital investment, and then on good years, maybe you replace a few more things. In Colleyville, we talk about the fact that we're blessed. We have for many years cash funded everything. We set aside an annual transfer to our vehicle and equipment replacement fund every year that allows us to regularly, on a cash basis, replace all of our equipment and vehicle needs. But that's more of that traditional model. So what we're going to talk about tonight is a little bit different. The way Enterprise Fleet Management works in terms of their program is really harnessing the government's buying power. So you're probably familiar that there's a sticker price and an MSRP price when you go out to a car dealership, and that's what the average consumer pays. But when the government goes out to market and buys, the typical what we call white fleet, truck, white vehicle, you slap your city logo on the side of it. That market in terms of the cooperatives and what the different manufacturers are offering in terms of government program pricing is a lot less than what you'd see at your typical consumer market price. So when you've got an example, this example uses a Chevy Silverado. So you may say there's a Chevy Silverado out there and you can go buy it in the private market, for example, $40,000. And then, you're looking at from a governmental price, government ability to buy it at a much lower price. So in this case, you're looking at, potentially $26,000 from a government price perspective, a lot less than that normal ticket price. So then you drive it for a few years and you say, okay, well, what's this worth if we were going to go trade it in? And you trade that in to either a dealer or an auction or somewhere like that. And depending on the, market for that vehicle at any given time, with that low mileage, you can often resell that vehicle for, in some cases, actually similar or just under or more than what you paid for it, because we were able to purchase it at such a low price up front. So part of the major strategy with enterprise fleet management is timing the replacement and resale of your vehicles to be a lot more financially efficient for the city. So when we look at this from a budget perspective, it's from are we spending our fleet replacement dollars in the most efficient way possible? And are there some other benefits that could come from having a newer fleet as well? So that's kind of one example, but we'll come back and talk about this in a little bit more detail as well. So this is just a schedule that shows that it makes sense there's an optimal time to replace any vehicle. So, your market value tanks out at certain points. Depends on what vehicle that is, but I think we all know when we've traded in our personal vehicles that there's kind of a sweet spot in which to do that. We also know that fuel efficiency in terms of the technology available in different vehicles has dramatically improved over time. And as vehicles are older and new technology is available, fuel efficiency continues to improve. We also know that the longer you hold on to a vehicle, the more maintenance dollars you're going to spend. So it kind of results in this optimal time to replace, which is what Jennifer and her team are really the experts at. So the other thing about enterprise that you may or may not be aware of, obviously when you hear enterprise, you think about the rental car company. So that's certainly one major aspect of their business, but they've got a whole other arm that handles this enterprise fleet management component that they're now offering to a lot of cities. So you think about harnessing enterprises worldwide abilities, and they're one of the largest worldwide, if not the largest, I think I heard you say.
The largest fleet in the world, yes.
Yeah, the largest purchaser and seller of vehicles in the world. So you think about all the expertise that comes with that. They know exactly when to time things, what vehicles go for the best resale, and being able to tap into that expertise is something that could really benefit the city.
Can I mention one
Please,
additional thing?
no, jump in.
So today, based on every city that we start working with, the process and getting bids is typically going through auction. And auction doesn't usually yield the highest rate of return. We created an internal department that all they do is hand sell our vehicles. The biggest competitive advantage we have overall is the fact that we resell vehicles for so much more. And most folks don't know we're just the largest used car dealer in the world. So we pin buyers against each other to drive up the sales price, and it's not just about when you sell them, it's who you sell them to, what time of the year you sell them, and it's so strategic. It's like playing the stock market. And it's where enterprise rent-a-car makes more profit reselling vehicles than we do renting them, and most folks don't know that. So that strategy we're bringing to cities, and that's how it's possible to replace vehicles more frequently and lower the overall total capital expenditure.
Exactly. No, great input.
So that's why it says 85%.
Direct to dealer.
Sell directly to
Yes.
dealers.
Yep.
I knew that was a big surprise to me.
And so not just on the resale side of that expertise, they also provide assistance on the purchase side. So when we go to purchase a vehicle, is the, for example, Chevy Silverado or Ford F-150 the best in terms of overall lifetime cost for the city? So what Enterprise is able to do with this, kind of massive expertise and experience in being the worldwide leader in these things can say, okay, for example, Ray, what does your public works team need? Tell us we need a crew cab and we need these capabilities, and here are all the different manufacturers and options you have. And based on what we're seeing in the market, this is the one that makes the best sense to be able to resale. So from a buying side, they've got that expertise to help as well. One of the things that may not result in immediate dollar savings in terms of efficiency, but is also important to talk about, is safety. Until Jennifer talked about this in our presentation, it wasn't something I really thought about, but you think about things that are now standard safety features in our vehicles, that when we're holding on to vehicles for typically 10-year time period, things like anti-lock brakes and some of the automatic warnings that come on if you're gonna back up into something, or lane assist. And it's a lot of those things that are standard now just weren't back then, and we have no idea what's ahead in terms of new technology vehicles will continue to come out with. And if we can put our employees in safer vehicles and prevent future exposure to or likelihood of accidents occurring, that's just another benefit to the city in terms of having that newer and safer technology.
Do we see an impact in our insurance rates from that also?
I don't know if we would necessarily get a reduction insurance rates, but maybe in the frequency in which we're having to file claims would likely be the potential dollar exposure benefit there. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but with improvements in technology and what's coming out in the newer vehicles from a safety perspective, the same thing is in fuel efficiency. I feel like anytime I've personally bought a new vehicle, it's always more fuel efficient than the last one that I had, and I'm sure you all experience the same. So I think that's something that, from an operating budget perspective for the city's operating funds, whether it's our general fund vehicles, our utility fund vehicles, our police vehicles, and our crime district, we have the opportunity to be more efficient from a fuel perspective as well. So one of the other components of the Enterprise Fleet Management Program that is available to us that we think is something that we should be interested in, worth looking at, is their maintenance program. So one of the things that they offer the ability to do is say, okay, these are all of the vehicles that you've procured through us with our assistance, and we will provide a flat fee, a flat amount to budget for each of those vehicles that allows you to project and minimize your exposure in terms of all those preventive maintenance items. They also help you with any of your warranty fixes or anything like that that might come up in terms of breaks or repairs. But so that's something that we think is interesting. What they do essentially is have a network of different local vendors, statewide, countrywide, wherever you may be, that allow our employees to take that vehicle in for a quick oil change or in for any of that. And if there's local vendors here in Colleyville, where we want to make sure that all of our local auto shops are participating in that program, and we have the ability to give that local that business to our local Colleyville businesses, if they're not already signed up, we can get them signed up. So when we're taking our maintenance dollars, that's something that we're able to do here locally.
What does it take for them to get in the program, our local shops?
It's fairly easy. It's free for the shop. And it's just a matter of getting their information so that we can pay them electronically and getting them set up on the Auto Integrate, which is the software in order to send repairs in.
Do you have any requirements of them that some of them?
That they're ASC certified.
Okay.
And I guess let me go back and remind everyone, I think we've talked about this in some of our earlier budget discussions, but one of the reasons why the timing of bringing this concept forward for consideration this fiscal year was because our longtime fleet manager had given an announcement that he was going to be retiring. So our fleet staff was comprised of the fleet manager and then 2 other fleet personnel. So this was a time where it might make sense to utilize a group like this, and you may recall that when we had our budget discussions and preliminary discussions a few weeks ago, that we said our intention was not to fill that position, and to kind of have that dollar savings in our general fund budget. So the timing on all of this to be able to take the preventative maintenance for those non-emergency vehicles and this type of program just made sense in terms of timing and logistics as well. So this is a really big picture budget look, and this is a little bit much to absorb, so we're going to dive through on an individual example to hit that home and make it a little bit more clear. But in terms of big picture, what this could mean in terms of financial efficiency for the city, by having a newer vehicle and then utilizing Enterprise Fleet Management services from a timing of resale and then making sure we're selling to the right folks, we have the ability to stretch our fleet dollars and what we're setting aside for our fleet replacement a lot farther. And when you project this out over a long haul, there's the ability to have some substantial savings in terms of the general fund and what we need to set aside. I tend to be very conservative in nature and don't want to pull back on budget dollars until it's really proven out. But in looking at it, I think there's a lot of opportunity from just the capital replacement side to have some substantial savings. So, of course, with any sort of program, when you're replacing the first 2 or 3 years to get all of our vehicles into that newer fleet, there's some upfront cost to do so before it saves. But from a operations point in terms of, well, what could we even expect in terms of savings year 1, you could immediately expect what we're projecting from a fuel and maintenance and operations perspective, easily 20,000 plus just from those operating savings.
And so does that roll in all of those things, fuel?
This is just from the capital.
Right, so that's just for the purchase of the vehicle?
Yes.
So in addition to that, you have the fuel savings and the maintenance savings?
Exactly, and that was the 20,000 plus in year 1 alone that we've projected out. But with that, we've got a little handout that I think makes it a little bit easier to walk through. And I'm gonna have Jennifer walk you through that while I'll pass this out to you guys. Well, got a copy for yourself?
Yeah, I've got a copy.
Okay, perfect. This kind of shows you in terms of capital and operating dollars what we're looking at.
Sometimes it's a little easier just to look at it on a per unit instead of looking at the entire budget.
Exactly.
And then it makes a little bit more, everything else makes a little bit more sense. We got one? Okay, so let's just look at the top section first, and we'll look at what you're doing today versus what we're recommending and why resale is the biggest component in total cost of ownership. It's the most important part. So on your left-hand side, you'll see that you have what we're recommending, and on the right-hand side is what you're doing today. So let's look at what you're doing today, the one vehicle in 8 years. So today, and let me just mention here that we picked the half-ton Chevy Silverado double cab. Bulk of the fleet within the non-emergency response, public works, parks, is half-tons, which is why we're looking at this example. So if we purchase that vehicle for $20,000, on average, we're holding on to these units in this particular segment of the fleet for 8 years. We anticipate that vehicle to be sold for around 10 grand at the end of 8 years, which is good. But we lose a lot of resale because we're running it. It's an 8-year-old truck. So overall, if you look at just the capital piece of it, it costs you $10,000 with your net gain of your equity at the end to operate that vehicle over that 8-year period. So we're recommending, based on the fact that resale is so significant, to replace those vehicles in half the amount of time. So you'll notice that your acquisition cost is $41,000. That's because it's for 2 vehicles. So we're gonna replace 2 vehicles in the same amount of time, but we're also gonna sell 2 vehicles back. We anticipate that vehicle to be worth around $16,000 when we sell it at the end of the 4-year period. So 2 of those vehicles at $32,000. So when you total up the equity that you're gonna get back for both vehicles, it's really only costing us around $9,400 to operate 2 vehicles over the same period of time. And so if you stop right there and all we're talking about is the capital piece alone, and you're making a decision about how frequently we should replace vehicles solely on resale, it 100% makes sense. And then, the fact that we're gonna save, 40% in maintenance and 27% in fuel, those are just, it's added bonus or cherry on top at that point. And so the significance, again, of resale is the largest component in total cost of ownership. And that's really the opportunity that the city has if you're replacing vehicles a little bit more frequently. Do we wanna move on to the other pieces of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so from an operating expense standpoint, we'll just kind of buzz through this. Our budgeted program allows us to fix the cost of maintenance. So what is the impact to operating expense? Well, we're willing to guarantee the cost because it should only cost the city this much to operate a half-ton truck up to 4 years. Depending on how many miles they're doing, maybe they need brakes and tires, maybe they don't. That's something we can customize on a per unit. So we're not paying for it if we don't need it. And if any repair occurs outside of that, we'll eat the cost because we're willing to guarantee that. So $2,800 again is for a full 8-year period of maintenance over that term. And again, remember, it's just routine maintenance. And then based on the city data that was provided to us, so remember, we're operating vehicles between 8 and 10 years. And because we have a longer life cycle, we have more repairs. On average, we're gonna save, quite a bit. It's about 40% in the first year in terms of savings and maintenance. And then from a fuel efficiency standpoint as well, we're replacing 8-year-old vehicles with new vehicles. So there's a $6,000 savings estimated for this unit over again, this is an 8-year period. If you look at the total life, based on what you guys are doing today. From an administrative standpoint, we were able to equate a very, would you say, conservative number as the time that's spent. Maybe it's not even the fleet department, maybe it's the department heads that have to spend time working with the aftermarket vendors or helping, acquiring the vehicles from the dealers and sourcing them and following up. So there's a lot of administrative time that goes into it, but we said, let's just conservatively say you only spend $200 per vehicle per year, so over eight years would be $1,600. Then there's some administrative cost to you guys doing it on your own, where we would be removing that administrative burden. Our management fee moving forward is, it's actually 1/10% of the delivered cost, so it would equate to about $1,900 on this unit. And then we have a service charge at, I should mention before, sorry, there's a RFP through the TIPS Cooperative, so from a buying power standpoint, all of the pricing parameters have been approved through that RFP, but the service charge at $400 at the end of term is for our remarketing team to handle the title, the paperwork, and the sale of the vehicle. So that would actually net out of the equity at the end.
Which is pretty similar to what we're paying for auction.
Yes, yes. Actually, based on the auction results that you provided, it was right in line with what you guys are already spending. We're just showing you 2 vehicles being sold, that's why it's $800 versus $415. So we're pretty close to a break even in terms of administrative cost. And then we just equated this across the 15 vehicles within the segment of the fleet. So if you jump down to the bottom there, total cost of 15 vehicles, again, the fleet is a little larger than this, but in terms of half tons, there was $105,000 savings if you're looking overall operating expense, capital, and administrative time.
And that's over how many years was it?
This was the 8-year period.
The 8
Yeah.
Thought it might be a little bit easier to walk through the individual example.
The resale is the largest component for sure.
So in terms of logistically how this works, wanted to provide a little bit of information on that. So when we work with Enterprise Fleet Management, if we choose to proceed, this would be ultimately we'd have a master agreement that allows them to basically be our broker and act on our behalf in that capacity to buy and sell vehicles. When we purchase vehicles, the paperwork would read as a lease, but we would pay that down to the very last $1, which allows them to hold title and act on our behalf as agent to handle all of the registration, the resale, all of that type of thing. But we would own all of the equity in the vehicle, so it would still be a city asset. It would still be, we're not paying financing charges or any of those things that we typically try to avoid, which is why we do things on a cash basis. But in terms of the mechanics, that's why. So when I mentioned earlier that a lot of cities aren't in as blessed a position as we are, and they're actually using it from a lease perspective and they're not cash funding their vehicles, that's what a lot of the cities are, but Keller and Prosper are the 2 cities that do what we do. And so again, being the skeptic, I wanted to see how things play out there before we jumped on. I never want to be on the bleeding edge. Let's kind of let some other folks be the guinea pigs before we jump in. But in many conversations, particularly with the CFO over in Keller who's entered into this, they've had a positive experience in terms of being able to cash fund.
They've been using that question.
They're both within their 2nd year of replacements, yeah.
Okay, say for some reason we opted to get out of it after being in, I don't know, 2 years or something, and we pay for the vehicles, so then those will be turned back over without any penalties? How does that work?
We pay our $1.
Yeah, you pay the $1 and you take title. And
Okay, so there's no-
the beauty of being a city is that you don't have a tax implication, so there's not even tax title licenses. Just pay the $1, we give you the title back.
Okay, and there's no penalties
Nope.
or anything like that? Okay.
Nothing.
Yeah, and I think on the maintenance side, if we ever decided, hey, we want to bring that back in-house, we don't want to do any of that, I want to say it was like a 60-day notice or something like that in the agreement when I went back through to check on that yesterday. So, again, some flexibility there if we were to decide to go in a different direction in the future.
Do we have any idea of what the cost, the startup cost is
Yes.
going to be?
Yes.
Was that in the second
In
presentation?
the synopsis that was in your agenda packet, there was a couple of examples, and it varies by fund because depending on what that vehicle's used for, each different fund may own it. So we have some general fund vehicles, utility fund vehicles, and so on.
That's what I
So-
remember seeing that.
Exactly. So in, for example, the general fund, year 1, kind of the net outlay after you sell and have the equity from the vehicles that are owned currently that you'd be reselling, you're looking at about a $450,000 outlay in year 1. Because in year 1, you're replacing 16 vehicles. And then in year 2, you're replacing another 5 to get it up to 21.
Is the idea that we do everything year 1, or it's that we do everything on their normal schedule?
We would,
Or adjusting schedule?
We have a little catch up to do.
Okay.
Because the age of the non-emergency response fleet is considerably older than
Okay.
emergency response,
Sure.
just based on the current schedule. And so the strategy is really twofold. One, it's tackling the oldest vehicles that are costing us the most in operating expense, but also replacing those that are at the optimum time for replacement in order to capitalize on the equity to help offset the cost of getting going. So that's why we're tackling those 16 out the gates to get on the plan, and then from there, we're just sustaining.
And so our vehicle and equipment replacement fund has a pretty healthy balance because we've done that annual transfer from the general fund for a number of years. So we feel pretty comfortable in our ability to make that initial investment and still do so on a cash basis. And maybe, right now we transfer $221,000 annually from the general fund to our vehicle and equipment replacement fund. So maybe we say, you know what, Colleyville, we're conservative folks. We like to be really, really cautious in our endeavors, and let's continue to leave that $221,000 in there for another year or two, just to build back that balance up so we've got some flexibility in the future if we want it. And, then in the future, maybe we'll drop that down a little bit, to reflect those capital savings. We have the ability to do that. And even with that, you're still gaining the benefit of the fuel savings, the maintenance savings, and just the overall newer vehicle that's a lot safer. So I think there's benefits in and of itself just from that perspective, but it leaves us a lot of flexibility. The program has these benefits. What we choose to do with it from a budget perspective are over here, but we've still got a lot of flexibility because we're in that great situation. So I think they've got a team, and we'll kind of go through that, but.
Yeah, I had another question.
Please.
About staffing and so forth. If we do this, it's going to cut significantly off of the activity. So have you had time to look into that?
Activity, what do you mean?
We have a staff member that's just retired.
Right, so
we're
so
not
with
I
doing
know
Tim,
that. That's one, but I'm just wondering.
I think there's maybe, you guys answer that, but maybe some redeployment people or not.
in terms of the fleet
He's
staff.
asking about,
People,
okay,
right?
maintenance going
Right.
down, we have people do maintenance,
Sure.
what do they do?
And let me be, the maintenance that we would be taking out would be for non-emergency vehicles only.
Sure, so we still have
So
emergency.
we'd still have all of our emergency vehicles that we
And
would.
all the other equipment.
And, yeah, and all of the other equipment. So we still feel like there is, an appropriate workload, and we'll continue to evaluate that on an annual basis for those 2 remaining employees. But when we initially started having conversations, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, with Jennifer, we brought everybody in all the departments around the table to make sure that everybody was comfortable with this concept, work through any concerns, any logistics. We had police, fire, parks, public works, fleet staff in particular. Ray went back and had lots of conversation. She spent lots of time with Chuck Tinsman, who's kind of our lead over in the police department in terms of understanding their vehicle needs. So I feel pretty comfortable that all of the different departments have been able to spend that time with Jennifer to make sure their understanding and comfort
Any
level is there.
remaining concerns by departments?
I'm sorry?
Any remaining concerns by departments?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, Ray and I have touched base, several times, and then Chief and I had a couple of conversations to say, okay, don't just tell me, you're comfortable because, you think that's what I want to hear. Let me know for real if there's concerns or, Chuck has any doubts about our ability to run this effectively, and none have come forward, so.
The only thing that I think could happen in the future is there be some condition in the state bid or co-op purchasing where they start restricting this. Because
Sure.
because in theory, there's no reason why a city or a consortium of cities couldn't buy vehicles and just trade them in the next year and get on a trade-in plan with a big enough dealership.
The agreement is with the manufacturers, not from a contractual standpoint. I wouldn't look at it as the state contractor buy board. The agreement it depends on the manufacturer, but because we have the same agreement in terms of Enterprise Rent-A-Car turning over their vehicles, and it depends on the manufacturer and the type of vehicle, but it's somewhere between 6 and 18 months that you have to hold it. So that's already in place as long as we adhere to those guidelines. So those are things that we're looking at in terms of recommending replacement. Worst case scenario, if the state contract said you couldn't do that, we will factory order the vehicles directly from Ford or GM, and we will bid for the incentives the same way that the state contract is doing it.
Sure.
So we're there as a safety net.
But my point is, I think there is an opportunity for, at some point in the future, this is either going to continue on and the cities will manage it themselves in a similar way, but maybe instead of using your format for the sale of vehicles, we'll use some type of trade-in system, or there'll have to be a change from either the manufacturer and/or the contract that you have to elongate that period. Because at some point, this will become big enough that it will, if continues to be successful, will run the risk of cutting a margin from either the manufacturer or a dealership.
Well, they're selling more vehicles though.
Yes, at a lower price.
So, I mean, replacing every 24 months and they're making even more money, so, but.
No, I like the idea, and I understand the concept, and so I've had this discussion years ago with this similar concept, so I think it makes sense. But it is something that does provide for some challenges, that are going to be unknown at this time. And so if you've got the opportunity to benefit from it, why would you not?
I got a question for you. What about vehicle damage whenever you go to sell it and trade it in and stuff like that?
So that's certainly something that you all take into
Yeah,
account.
when we consider what the vehicle is worth, we're looking at how they're being used ahead of time. So,
Okay.
how we're evaluating a police Tahoe versus how we would evaluate a half-ton pickup truck would be different. And so that's part of it, but I think from a damage from an insurance perspective, it stays the same with TML, regardless of whether we're helping you or.
Didn't it tailgate scratched up, that's all that jazz?
Wear and tear.
Okay.
Now, if there's major damage on it, then that's where we would provide a recommendation. Like, if you fix it, it's worth this much. If you don't want to fix it, then here's what it would be worth and what is more financially advantageous for the city to do.
But that is one advantage of holding it for the entire life of the vehicle.
Yeah, right.
Is if you're harder on those vehicles, that you don't see that detriment. However, it could be argued if you're harder on those vehicles, you're probably seeing additional cost in maintenance.
Sure.
Because they're not treating the operation of the vehicle well either.
Are we
mechanically.
harder on those?
Well, it's just depends on the type of use. If you're shoveling
Yeah.
a peanut shell or pecan shells like we do out of the back of a bed or something.
Coal patch.
Sure.
Take a little more
Yeah, all that
use.
stuff can affect the wear and tear.
So some we are and some we aren't,
Correct.
is what you're saying.
Sure.
And use-
Some of them just to transport people, mostly, right?
Well, every one of our
Sure. Number.
vehicles, has a different use, but
That's what I'm
serves
saying,
some- yeah,
sure.
Sure.
But yeah, certainly there are a
Yeah.
number that are.
Yeah, one other question, I know personally, if I have a newer vehicle, I pay a higher insurance. And I'm assuming it's the same for us.
I think our insurance is by a pool of vehicles. I don't know that they actually get down to the actual vehicle itself.
May I speak to that for just a moment? We go with a very high deductible through TML. And so while it's basically self-insured, it is the pool that's insured. And so if we have a vehicle value under $5,000, which is what our deductible is on that, then we keep it at the lowest possible denominator.
Sure.
So as everyone upgrades their equipment and/or vehicles, those rates are adjusted accordingly. And we've been seeing about an average of a 3% increase in those rates.
Every year.
Mhm. This
I'm
year
just
they took
wondering
a
if-
pass.
But that's the
If they
policy,
might
not-
increase more with newer vehicles, I don't know.
Our vehicles that we purchase, we actually kind of quash. The newer vehicle does have higher prices, but we also get a safety standard on our newer vehicles that reduces.
Oh, reduces, great.
Yes, so it's kind of,
There may be a little bit of an offset there.
Okay.
But I think what City Secretary's talking about, when you're buying fleet vehicle insurance
Sure.
through your pool policy, they tend to be more about the number of vehicles and the general age, and less to be about the specific model and the,
Oh, okay.
and the year, because
great.
it's a minor
Well,
deviation. on
balance
your-
out.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
I know this is going to be a little bit of an off-the-wall question also. Some of our trucks, I guess, pull goosenecks and stuff like that. It's okay to alter those vehicles after
We
we
do
get them.
all the same things that they're doing today.
We had a lot of conversation about aftermarket changes, particularly as it relates to our police Tahoes.
One other thing
That
maybe to
obfuscates
add
everything else.
before we wrap up is just the order timing and the Tahoe.
Yes, and I think,
Wanna talk about that
we
now?
talked to Sergeant Tinsman, so I think we're okay there.
Just- Okay.
Yeah, so if the council's comfortable, we'll bring forward at one of your future your council meetings, an agreement to consider, to enter into a relationship with Enterprise.
Will that need to be done before we complete the budget?
Not necessarily. I mean, the budget sets aside the dollars to do
We have the
some-
money.
Yeah, we have the money, and it's just a matter of which way we want to spend
Okay,
it.
Everybody comfortable? I am.
I am.
Yeah.
definitely.
We're good.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bottom line. Bottom line
Thank you.
looks good.
We'll go to the second agenda item, which is review of fees and charges.
Everybody loves fees and charges.
We just have a couple to consider.
Exciting.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So tonight, we have a few discussion items related to fees and charges that we wanted to talk with you about. So this happens every budget year. It's part of the process that we look into. So on an annual basis, we review our fees and charges. We ask our departments to take a look at those and determine if there's any needed increase or recommended increase or changes, and we present that to the city council. So that's the process that we're at tonight. We just have a couple to present. If you remember last year at the budget time, we had no recommended changes to any fees or charges, and this year we just have a couple. If you do want to make any of these changes, then we'll bring these back at a future council meeting for your consideration. So first of all, we're going to talk about the Colleyville Center, and Leslie is here if you have any specific questions for her, but this is mainly related to the additional courtyard that's being constructed. Yes,
In your
sir.
packet of electronically, it starts on page 30, I believe. It doesn't show up as a bookmark on the
Yeah,
left.
there's no bookmark on the left.
But it's on page 30, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just skipped over, I didn't see. I didn't see it.
32. It's
So
where-
as you know, the Colleyville Center has a 3,900 square foot courtyard that's currently under construction. It's slated to be open early September. The additional space necessitated a review of the building rental fees, and the Colleyville Center Advisory Board has approved these proposed fee increases. As you know, the rate structure for the Colleyville Center is differentiated by resident, non-resident, Colleyville business, non-Colleyville business, and also Colleyville nonprofit. And so that's how the fees are structured. The first fee, recommended increase, so these all relate to the entire building rental. So if you rent the entire building, that includes the courtyard. You'll see that the courtyard is not available à la carte. It's included in the entire building rental. And you can see that the weekday rate is recommended to go up $300. And then same thing on the Friday and Sunday. And then Saturday is considered prime rental. And so it's recommended to increase $300 as well for that additional use of the courtyard space. And this is for non-resident and non-Colleyville business rate.
How often do we rent that out at that rate? Leslie, is it quite often, or is it,
The entire building?
yes, at the non-resident rate?
Most of our rentals on weekends are non-residents. I would say 90% of our rentals. Yeah.
Good.
Great.
So that's taking into consideration adding the courtyard to it. That's basically why
Yes.
it was thought to
It's
do
a
that.
charge for the courtyard. Because that would be included with the inventory.
It's a little over 16,000 extra.
Moving on to Colleyville nonprofit and civic organizations. The only increase would be on the weekend for that rate as well. The weekday is not affected or proposed to be affected. And then you can see the weekend, Friday and Sunday, would be increased to $1,050, up from $900. And then Saturday would be $2,000 for the entire building rental, including the courtyard, increased from $1,760 to $2,000. And that's for our nonprofit and civic organizations. And then in terms of a Colleyville resident or a Colleyville business, again, an increase on the weekday from $1,440 to $1,680. Friday and Saturday, or Friday and Sunday, same thing, and then a prime Saturday, an additional increase as well. We'll note that Colleyville resident and Colleyville businesses automatically receive a 20% discount for being a Colleyville resident or business, and that's 20% discount from the non-resident, non-Colleyville business rate.
Great.
And again, these have been presented to the Colleyville
So
Advisory
on
Committee.
weekends, you can only rent the whole building.
Yes.
And there's, so during the week, if you rent the South Hall or North Hall, you can't get access to the
It's just that room that you rent.
Do we,
Why is that?
That's just the way we designed it. From a standpoint
I
of.
mean, there's a door in each of those, that's why somebody,
Yeah, because if I have if I have someone in the north and the south hall,
Yeah.
and someone rents now the courtyard,
Yeah,
it will be visible from the south hall. Like, so if I have a seminar and they're doing like a reception,
okay.
it won't work. That's why we had to kind of roll it into an entire building.
So if you rented the assembly hall though, that's both.
Yes, then you would get it.
Oh, you would get it?
Yes.
Okay. So
You can do the garden plaza because it's out front, right?
yeah. I guess it just didn't make that clear. I was not, until I asked that question, when you could get the Blue Bonnet Courtyard wasn't clear. in the
Yeah, it
table.
should say included with the assembly
Yeah.
hall.
I see what
For
you're
the
saying.
entire,
If you have both sides, you could
Yeah.
have the courtyard.
Yeah.
Because there's a potential you could have two different groups, and then it'd be competition.
I would
for
put
you.
that in there so it's clear.
Good.
And so, so there's another asset there, but was that discussed with the committee? If you got the assembly hall, you also get the plaza? There's no increase on that?
Yes.
You did discuss that?
And they were good with that? Good.
The decision was made that we're not gonna rent the courtyard separately.
Yeah. What drives the increase on the entire building?
Courtyard.
The courtyard.
Okay, so
Yeah, so
why
why
wouldn't
would
it
it
drive
drive?
one on the assembly hall?
Yeah.
The only argument you could make is that you wanted to encourage them to rent the whole thing. But the question is, if you rent the entire hall, why is there not a premium charge option for the courtyard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think there would be. I mean,
They
it
don't
costs
have
us
to take
money.
it.
Well, during the week, to be honest with you, during the week, most of our rentals are typically businesses, like seminars and things like that. And if they use the entire hall, they might use that for maybe lunch now, something like that. I don't really see anyone wanting to just rent the plaza.
No, I'm not,
No, no,
I'm not
it's
saying
the
it's the
opposite.
plaza.
The opposite.
They get access to the plaza
Right,
if they rent the assembly hall.
right.
And for the whole building, there's an additional charge because we now have the plaza they have access to. But the full assembly hall, they get it, but there's no.
You could
This
just,
should be increased.
you could just say the 560 is the charge, but if they want access or use of the plaza, there's a premium for that.
Yeah, I could do
$300
that.
more
You could do
Because
that.
then in the winter, they
Yeah.
may not want to.
Yeah,
Yeah, they might not
that
want
makes
it.
sense.
Yeah.
Very flexible.
Give the option.
I mean,
You ought to
right,
get something for it.
right now, we charge $300 for the front garden area.
Yeah.
So the intent was that, I mean, we can include that if they would like to include it, we'll just charge an additional $300.
And
We're
if
trying
you
to
get
keep
the
our
north-
pricing consistent,
If you get the north or the south, it's not available because you don't want people outside the window, I get that.
right?
But if you rent the entire assembly hall, north and south, the 560 could be the standard, and then you could charge,
Upcharge.
I'm just saying 700 or whatever, or 300 more to include the plaza, and then they've got that as an option.
And then there's a charge for you to set it up. I mean, that's the point, there's a cost to set it up, right?
Right.
So
And it's more
we should be
space, too.
collecting some kind of fee for
Yeah.
that.
So if you rent both north and south, then there's an additional fee for an option for additional
Yeah.
fee for it. That makes sense. Yeah,
For how much, 300?
300.
yeah.
Okay,
Consistent with the garden and the other increase.
so then that needs to be
Yeah,
modified.
modify that for when we bring back the fees. Okay. Moving on to Parks and Recreation, the consideration is for the web house. As this construction is finalized and groups can start utilizing the building, recommending the fees that you see before you. That picture was taken last week, so as you can see, it's looking very nice. The landscaping and the things are coming in very nicely. And they're wrapping that construction up. So a fee used to be charged for the rental of this building, but then whenever it started not being used for rental, then that fee was taken off our schedule. And so these are actually the rates that previously were charged for the use of the web house. As you can see, there's a discount for resident versus non-resident, and then the rental times, and then the 3-hour minimum, and then additional hours after that.
What do these fees include? Like, are there chairs or tables, or is that stuff extra, or what? I just don't know what's.
There's nothing in there.
It's just so you're renting a
just you get the building,
space,
yeah.
and you can bring in portable chairs or tables
Right.
if you need to. So do these fees cover our costs, whatever cleaning and whatever else needs to be
Yeah.
done?
Cleaning and portion of, operational AC and things like that.
I mean, I think a lot of it's just, gotta send staff over there, lock, unlock, and pull them away from daily operations. And
it seems to me,
Food and beverage in?
I'm sorry?
Food and beverage, can you bring food and beverage in?
I mean, that would be up to you all. The room agreements were fairly restrictive, if I recall, for when we used to rent it. But I mean, it's certainly up to the council's discretion what you'd like to allow there or whatnot.
Is the maintenance gonna be easier now that it's been updated?
I mean, from a bathroom perspective, we're just gonna always maintain that as we would any, any city facility. From the interior, not a whole lot aside from the painting.
I've never
and
been inside
cleanup.
of it, so I don't know.
It's,
Yeah.
when you walk in those front two doors there's kind of a little room here and room here. And it's almost like a breezeway that stops where the new bathroom is on that back right-hand side. So there's not a lot of space.
What was it used for before?
Nothing. I mean, I think we would occasionally get maybe like a baby shower or, type request, but,
Food if you're
The
in a
Lions
baby
Club.
shower?
I
Yeah,
mean,
you're gonna want
I
to
would
bring
think
food in
so.
there, of course.
but I mean, there's no sink facility. I mean, aside from what's in the restroom, I mean, there's no,
There's no amenities.
there's no
really.
kitchenette of any sort.
Basically like if you're having a party in a pavilion.
Just a
Yeah.
suggestion. I think obviously these are the prices you charged before, so they make sense as a starting point. But I think you should take a different approach, and that is that the resident rate on the weekday and weekends should be nominal. It should be so that we can encourage the use of the facility. Because right now, I don't think there's a lot of need out there that knows this is available and that it's something they can use. And so by making it inexpensive for resident, the non-resident rate should still be high, you might get some more interest and Cub Scouts or Girl Scouts or whatever may use it for meetings or whatever. And so I would take the resident rate down to, first of all, I'd maybe get rid of the minimum. And then what is our cost to go in and clean it? Do we have to clean it that day or can we wait the next day? And so I think our costs are fairly minimal in that sense. And so I would bring the resident rate maybe down $25 or something.
The only rationale I'd offer that I think was part of the discussion in the past on these rental rates was that they were trying to avoid a situation where people go here as opposed to the small conference room at the Colleyville Center because it's significantly cheaper.
Well, but there's gonna be no amenities here, right?
No,
No table, no
there's not.
chairs,
There's
which
not.
the Colleyville Center certainly does offer.
So they
right?
have to add a lot more expense to get what they wanted in there if they did.
Well, and I think part of this, though, is that you've got an asset here that is something you want to see utilized in a positive way, but it doesn't lend itself to all of the traditional
Right.
opportunities like the Colleyville Center does. And so unless you create that process, it's not going to happen organically. And so all I'm saying is, hey, if a year from now, it's really taken off and it's cost more and it's been, a burden, well, then you can look at raising the rates.
What do we charge for pavilions right now?
Lisa, what do we charge for pavilions?
Our park pavilion rental.
It's $30 an hour for resident and $40 for non-resident.
And those are traditionally larger probably than this.
Oh, sure.
Yes,
space.
they traditionally say
I like
It's
that
open,
idea.
right?
50.
But they're not
Right, yeah.
So this would,
climate controlled.
this is
It is climate
essentially
controlled,
$20 an hour, and you're saying it's $30 an hour because it's $60 for a 3-hour for resident? So this is cheaper than our pavilion?
Well,
And I think
No.
it needs to
No,
be.
no,
No, it's $6 an hour.
$60 per hour.
it's
It's
not-
$180 for a resident to utilize it for 3 hours.
I think it needs to have a minimum, but if not, then you're gonna have back-to-back-to-back people trying to get.
Yeah, you can't do
But I
that.
like the
Oh,
idea
wow.
of lower
And then-
price point, for at least the first year, let's encourage residents
I think
to
the
use it, but I
minimum
agree
is
Bobby
critical,
about minimum
because
$20.
we don't want to be running out there.
No, and you can obviously book them to make sure you provide the gaps, but I agree. I don't have a problem with the minimum. I'm trying to get interest in it.
Yeah.
And so, and you could even, I agree with your question about, tables and chairs and things, you could have those provided as well. But at some point, you've got to create a functionality there, or you want to close it and make it a museum type thing.
Is that a
Yes, I
tile
agree.
floor or wood floor?
Wood. It's wood. And so, but you know what though, Bobby, it's also a wood-sided building, and so you're gonna be painting it every couple of
That's
years.
not, my point is that whenever you're bringing in tables and chairs, that they're not,
Scratching.
They might be scratching the floor and, your damages on your deposit's only $200.
That's why we need to
Cheap.
provide it,
Yeah,
so
we
we
can put
know
some
that
in
it's
there.
gonna, that's why I'm getting
Oh,
at.
that's what I was
You know,
gonna say.
I would like to
we
see
should
an option
provide-
where we provide.
People bringing
That
in.
makes more sense.
Yeah, if you bring.
Can we do an open house
I
or
was gonna
something
say, maybe we should do an
so that
event.
people
We're
understand?
planning on ribbon cutting.
Yeah, the ribbon
Good.
cutting right now is
Good.
slated for probably 1st of September. We're finalizing some orders on signage and, the water fountain and then the bench, one of our benches is still on order. So by the time we get all the amenities dressed up.
Is that gonna be, I mean, some of our ribbon cuttings that I know I've been to in the past, it's more of just kind of council has come and we've cut the ribbon and that's the end
Well,
of
I
it.
think we can invite
Yeah.
anybody from the
House.
community and make
I
that as
think we
big as
need
we want
to.
to, yeah.
And
Because
I think we should make it an event.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah, do
Because
an
a lot of
open
people
house.
see it there and they're not gonna know
Have
anything
little
about
bounce
it.
houses or something?
And I think similar to what we're
Right,
doing at the
face painting or-
Colleyville
I mean,
Center when we
stuff,
showcase the
right.
plaza,
The
we're doing
things
that
that-
in more of an open house format, we could do the same thing
Well, the
here.
I think we need to,
Yeah.
because people would love to see it. I don't think they'll come. as
They'll
you
just
said,
see it
much more of a
painted, they
ribbon.
won't know it's much different.
Right, they won't
yeah.
know that
I went
what's
by
going on.
today, it looks really, really good.
It's beautiful.
And I think it's worth noting too for the public that a big component of this effort was the public restroom that serves the trail.
Exactly.
And so part of this, you know, rental is one aspect, but the public restroom is
The key.
really a great improvement that really drove this process.
Yeah.
And so now people using the trail have access to a public restroom, a trailhead, if you will, where they can park. And that restroom is controlled with electronic locks and will be open during the day.
If you rent the facility, is it still open to, as a trailhead restroom?
Yes.
So it's open from either side
But the,
electronically?
but the trail access is outside, so you can get
Yes,
from the
like
outside.
they don't come through the party.
Is there gonna be a sign there that lets people know on the trail that there is a
Yes.
restroom?
That's what we're working with right
Okay,
now.
so-
We're gonna do a traditional,
Water fountain and everything
sign, you know, kind of from our sign shop off of the trail that says, you know, rest stop this
Good.
way. And then more kind of historic looking signage, with the history up closer to the building, and then some restrooms on the side and then on the door, so that it's real clear where people can go.
Sure.
And so that's part of the, answers the question, why the renovation? Well, we want to preserve the historical significance, but also have functionality in a public restroom. And if we've got a facility people can rent, that's also a benefit.
The real option is to make, you know, restrooms there, put some, keep built outside for picnics and make for museum.
Sure.
That's a real option.
You set it up with stages, furniture, and you have it available for tours and things.
That was done at one time where furniture was in there.
Whatever happened to the gentleman who has all of the artifact? Well, we need to do something there.
It couldn't possibly fit in here.
Well, I'm not saying, I'm just,
Yeah, I know.
Really couldn't fit in either one of those houses. All the
well, I'll
stuff that
put
he's
it
got.
half and half or
No,
something.
but
He's
you're
got
right,
it in
I
a
agree with you.
huge
You'll
barn.
get comment on that.
Well, on the web,
I
on the
don't
web
think we can
house,
force him to
I
do
think
it.
it sounds like a lot of people agree that we need to provide chairs and tables if people want to use them. I mean, in any effort to maintain the interior, so.
And we might
I
wanna
agree,
agree
I
that
can't-
you permanently live there.
I
so
think
that
that's
you're
a
not
great
transporting
idea.
Yeah, I think
Exactly.
that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, so I think that's something we should look into.
Sure, okay. So we'll look at the tables and chairs and also looking at the fee and dropping that down for
Yeah,
residents.
so if you're providing tables and chairs, how, my question would be, how would you do that? Would they be moved in and out?
I think it'd
I would
probably.
keep
Store them on site.
Hopefully we'd
I
keep
would
them
store
there.
them there.
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah, I think
table.
that's what I was just suggesting to
Yeah.
Councilmember Wheat, was that if we're gonna provide tables and chairs, we would wanna do so
Yeah,
in
folding
they're
chairs
permanently
so
kept
that-
there kind of way.
What would
I
they
would
be?
see how it's gonna go the first year.
Yeah, okay, so what I'm hearing then, next action, okay, we need to think about this some more, and let's hear a little bit
Yeah.
more specific
Yeah.
proposal on options on this.
And the
Yeah.
best way to do that, have a forum where we can go out there, take a look, and once it's ready and it's open,
Okay.
it's
When, I
completed.
got a question, it doesn't have anything to do with rental. Did we have to replace any of the siding?
We did some, but we preserved as much of the wood siding as we could, so
Okay.
it's real.
I'm just wondering if we shouldn't have considered using hardy
Hardy?
siding or something like that.
You know, that's a great question. We had that discussion. It would have added substantially to the cost. And the original siding does require more maintenance, but it also has that real look. And
I know.
so it's a great question, and we went back and forth on that, but it is the original
Someday
wood with some repair.
someday we may need to consider that.
Yeah.
Do
What
one
did we
side at a
spend on
time.
this? I forgot.
800?
No, two something.
Those two
265.
That's
I
fine.
was saying mid.
Okay, John, you got your action?
Okay.
Yes. We don't have to talk about this in the interest of time. This is on second reading tonight.
Right.
You all know HB 852 required that building permit fees, how they're charged be changed. So that's on second reading tonight, so I won't go into this in the interest of time. We'll talk about this tonight, so that's it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, now for the big one, 5-year CIP. How many slides you got, Ray? I'm kidding you.
I reduced it down a bit, so.
He's down to 25. We're good.
Yes.
This one went on.
So I'll try to sweep by where I can and go from there.
A lot of stuff happening.
Yes.
Busy year, good.
Mayor, council members, good evening. Ray Silveres, Director of Public Works. I will be presenting the draft capital improvement program, also known as the CIP plan. The CIP is a short-range rolling plan, usually 3 to 5 years out, which identifies capital projects and provides a planning schedule. And including funding options as well. So there are some benefits. Allow me to highlight some of the benefits that come with the CIP. A couple here that I suggested. It provides a link between the strategic plans and the city's annual budget. Serves as a public education tool and supports the city's long-term goals and vision. So let me start with the recap of the 2019 CIP plan. Also, let me underscore that the 2019 projects are of today and not originally adopted back last year. So with that, we'll go into here. The Central Fire Station repairs, both the number 1 and number 2 right here are underway. They're being designed for the roof repairs and the exterior walls. They're all being designed right now. Currently, will be advertised here soon. Those will be underway. The City Hall automatic doors are out to bid currently. We should have a bid opening next week, and we'll be presenting that to council on the 2nd July meeting. The City Hall backup generator will be on tonight's agenda for awarding, so that one's already underway. And the Plaza parking facility is another one that we just added potentially here. I know there's some late developments here for the open land that's just east of the Plaza. So altogether facilities, we're looking at $910,000 that are still outstanding. So far what we have finished this year is the library renovations and the web house, which is at 95% complete, 2019. On the other departments, the information technology, we still have the fiber optic that's outstanding. We still have some work that's being done. Design work for the crossings of the railroad tracks and 26. We have about $300,000 set aside for that. The ongoing stormwater master plan that should be completed towards the end of this year. For Parks and Recreation, we awarded the Colleyville tree restoration project about a couple of council meetings ago for $73,000. We're also waiting for the bids to come back on the fence, the decorative fence along the Cottonville Trail. The plaza at City Hall is underway right now, as most of you know about, and we're looking at 2.7 on that one. There are some plans to do some sand volleyball pit rehabilitations, and these are clustered all together for the volleyball, so it's not just one individual. We're looking to completely relocate the entire volleyball pit, so that's what it's at $40,000. And then the shade and seating at the city park quad area. Back over here, we're looking to do some $250,000 improvements. For the streets this year, Bransford Road and also McDonald School Road are going to be going on the way here shortly. McDonald School Road will start next week, actually, and Bransford will be at the heels of that project, which will be 4 weeks behind McDonald. Cheeksparger Road design is still underway. We have temporarily lost funding, but we have managed to get it back, and it looks like we're looking at a March tentative letting date for that project. But we're still in the design right now. The City Hall Plaza Terracotta one-way expansion, that's the one we had a work session a couple months ago, and we're gonna wind the north and south route to accommodate two-way traffic. And that one's out for bid, actually came in today. Frontier Court Rehabilitation was one that was awarded back towards the beginning of this year. Due to the high groundwater table in that area, we're still holding off the contractor to not go and make it worse than what it is. Some of the groundwater is already starting to recede, so he's hoping to get in there maybe towards the end of this month. Glade Road, this will be a part of the HMAC contract today. This is the Glade Road, the main one is going to be from 26 to Pool. It's under design. It's currently at 95% design. We're going to have some further discussions on this one because of the grant money that's been set aside for the Blue Bonnet Glade Road intersection. And so as we develop, find out more information regarding the strings attached to the grant money, we'll come back and decide how we're going to move this project forward to construction. Glade Road Rehabilitation, this was the part that got omitted from the original Glade Road long-term project. From Pool to Overhill is part of the HMAC project that you're going to see tonight. That was estimated at $325,000. John McCain Road and West Coast Drive roundabout design is under design. It's another one that will be on agenda tonight. We are having to switch companies. It went from MSA to Kimley Horn, but it's still moving forward as far as design is going. The LD Lockett Road right turn lane design hasn't been issued yet, but it's still being looked at. We're trying to see if there are any plans that were done by TxDOT originally to add a right turn lane at the Precinct Line Road and LD Lockett. McDonald School Road, West Coast Drive about design. We're about I'm sorry, so yes, this is the one that's gonna be on council tonight that will be switched over. The other one was the Wesco, which is a 95%, so I apologize for that mistake. The McDonald School Road rehabilitation, we just talked about that one. Parking facilities at the Colleyville Center and Public Works Center, it's also part of the HVAC contract. We are looking to resurface those parking lot areas. Roberts Road design is underway right now. We just received 30%, and we're looking to identify what right-of-way will have to be acquired with this one. And the street maintenance program, 2019, is gonna be on the agenda tonight, and those have about 5 or 6 streets that I'll dive into later. So far, what we've completed this year is the Cheeks Parker Road from Bedford to Heritage through Tarrant County, and then the McDonald School Road, West Coast Drive roundabout acquisition that we got from Scarceton. For the water wastewater projects, we have the Bransford Water Tank and Overland Trail design. Those are about approaching 60%. You'll see this in upcoming work sessions to look at the final site layout. The LD Lockett Pump Station Emergency Generator. Since we just got the generator, we looked at the OPCC for that one, and it was a little bit high, so we're working with the consultant to see if we can get that lowered a little bit. The Pleasant Run Waterline Project and the Pleasant Run Waterline Vault design is a project that's already on design. During design, we thought it'd be best to go ahead and have interconnectivity between South Lake and the city of Colleyville in case of emergencies. So we're adding this design to that component to this design. And then we have set some money aside for the State Highway 26 water wastewater conflicts that we keep having with the construction of State Highway 26. The SCADA, you saw that last council meeting, that has been issued for design, so we're working with that one. And then Water Project 10 here for the Apple Valley subdivision is more of a redundancy issue and water supply for fire suppressions in that area. And so we're looking, it's about a 60% design on that one.
Ray, can you go back? What is the 26 water wastewater complex?
So those are the water lines that are the city owned on 26 that have been relocated, but we still have some conflicts with the design of the road. So we keep relocating them and redesigning.
Gotcha.
So we have set some money aside into this project. The only one that we've finished so far is the pressure relief valve that's 100% complete now. So now we're gonna go and dive into the 2020 and 2024 CIP.
So that valve ended up reducing having to go out and do manual.
Correct, now we can
corrections.
if the lower pressure plant needs water, we can introduce water to that area.
That's great.
Can you do that by app? App?
We will once we get the SCADA
That's what
implemented.
SCADA does.
SCADA will do it, yeah.
But right now, we have the ability to do it. So now we'll move on to the 2020 CIP projects. This is our only percent for that fiscal year. In your packets, you have an overall comprehensive details of every project from here to 2024. So I will not jump into those, but a couple of things to note. Let's see. Let me get to this here. A couple of things to note here. This is a map of all the projects that are going on for fiscal year 2020.
Great.
We wanted to see the public of all the projects that are taking place. If I can get Christine to switch out, we're gonna debut something here for you as far as an interactive map that will allow the public to see all the projects that are being taken place.
Brenda, I'm sorry, I cannot see that. Is there a reduce here? Or do I have to go to the end and close it down?
Okay, so this is it right here. This is what the public will see. And basically, it drills down by tabs, facilities, parks and recreation, sidewalk trails. So you can click on any one of these, will be available to the public.
That's awesome.
And then you can dive in even more to the specific project that they want to look at.
Great.
And they'll all be categorized.
That looks great.
So
Get
this is
over on
something.
streets, will you, Ray? Get on streets.
Streets.
That's awesome.
So that way, it was gonna be too much to go back to the original one and try to fit all these in. We tried, but you can't hardly see it. So this would be something for the public and for you guys as well to work with as well.
Love this.
So we go back to.
Super.
Who did that?
And so that, Craig all goes to Petite in the IT department, the management analysis. She's also the one who put together the packet for you that drives down as well.
Petite
It came from her.
routes.
Petite, yeah, she did a great job on that one.
So we can direct people directly to the website. It's
Exactly.
going to the website,
So it'll
correct?
be available to everybody, and then I'm just gonna focus a little bit on each one of those projects. On the 2020, we have set some money aside for the drainage improvements, pending on the stormwater master plan being done this year. Want to prioritize the projects, we have $500,000 set aside. Look at those. The floodgates upgrade, we are looking to get that under design here as soon as the year rolls in and get those those floodgates automated so that we're not sending police officers back and forth every time to close them and to turn on the lights. So it'd be just automated. And as soon as the water depletes, we can blow them back up just from push of a button. So those will be your drainage improvements for 2020. On facilities, we have quite a bit. If you look down, we have almost $10 million worth of CIP improvements. Starting with City Hall Library, we're looking at HVAC replacement. The Colleyville Center will get a new roof. There's some placeholder for additional Colleyville Center renovations. The construction of a parking facility at the Central Fire Station. I don't know if you've noticed, but the Central Fire Station is limited on parking, and there are something that we can do to help that out. The Entrepreneur Center, as you heard last council meeting, work session, we're setting some money aside to help Mark and the chamber work on those improvements. So we're going to look at doing improvements or facelifts to the Parks building here on Bransford. The Justice Center will be getting a new metal roof coating. We set some money aside, about $5 million worth for land acquisitions. We're also looking to do some Public Works Service Center site improvements for design and also for implementation once we get those designs done. Rehabilitate the historic fire station on Howell Johnson as well, give that a facelift there. And then we have 3 restaurant facilities that we're going to look at the Nature Center, at Reagan Park, and then some restaurant facility renovation at City Park. This one here is at $800,000. It's a little high, but it's just a placeholder for now because it is going to be built in the floodplain. And so there's a lot of stuff that we have to consider and design as far as how do we keep the water from going inside the sinks and in the pipes, and depending where we put it and how we elevate it. So.
And Ray, the restroom at City Park also may or may not have some components that go into concession stand. And so that's also high. But once we get into the design and the finishes, no more, because we're having air conditioning and things that are more than just
And
tile.
the City Park is actually 2 bathrooms.
Yes, and there's 2, right? One by the tennis courts, one by the ball fields.
So, yeah. So
Okay.
this is kind of what we place the holders on.
Yeah, those 2 800s hit me in the face.
I was gonna say, wow.
It's kind of expensive, but
Because we have a whole lot, we got a lot of houses in the city
yeah.
that cost less than 800,000.
I don't know if
Bathrooms
Lisa,
are very expensive to renovate.
Lisa, if you have anything else you want to add on
Bathrooms
those
are very expensive.
placeholders? Is everything pretty much
For the
covered?
Nature Center one, we're also looking at implementing some, unfortunately, we had some graffiti that was done at the Nature Center, so possibly some security cameras as well as some emergency stations throughout the Nature Center. So that will be all in the scope of work.
Yeah,
we know
one
anything
thing I was
further of
thinking
food
about
dinners?
is maybe that one, we may have to do something special on the outside to be able to make it graffiti
Proof?
Well,
resistant.
The dilemma on all these things is that unfortunately cameras are the way of the future.
Sure.
But on the different facilities, it stands to reason the Nature Center facility will look different than the Regan
Sure.
Park or the
Of
City
course.
Park. So we're gonna be looking at some very unique architectural sketches and ideas that make sure it fit. But unfortunately, the graffiti and that's the same conversation as the emergency notification.
Sure.
Those are things that you hope you never have to use, the cameras or the emergency notification, but these days you need those things for individuals that are out in these remote areas.
Sure did.
Yeah, so the cameras is a component of it. That's another aspect of it.
Good.
One thing that I forgot to discuss earlier when we went through these one by one is some master plans that we've added to the CIPs. So we have a drainage fee assessment study to see if we're charging exactly what we need to be as far as the stormwater fee goes. We're looking at water risk and resilience assessment that the EPA has rolled out that every city has to do one. We are set to have one done by 2021. So I want to go ahead and get that in place. And then the water, wastewater, roadway impact fees that should be done more or less every 5 years. On Parks and Recreation, now we have the landscape improvements for near the pavilion at McPherson Park, a new warm-up area at the city park baseball fields, some park signage / branding programs that will be taking place, some parkway tree removal and replacements. This one here, we're looking maybe to trim some of the trees along the major corridor areas throughout the city. Also looking at some playground improvements at Sparger Park. On the sidewalks and trails, we have set aside some money for if we do get any of the grants, $500,000 to match any of those grants. And the Cheeksparger Trail, which is on the south side of Cheeksparger between Bedford and Colleyville, to restore that trail and make it usable again. And then the miscellaneous concrete rehabilitation that was part of the O&M side, the operation and maintenance, has been brought up to the CIP to alleviate some room and help us out with some new assets that we're going to be adding.
The Cheeksparger Trail assumes cooperation with Bedford as well.
Right.
So that
It assumes, yeah, we have a budget there for if we had to go in it by ourselves, but yes.
But, and not only the rehabilitation of Bedford, but there's also then crosswalks that need to be put in to get to our residents. And so there's more than just rehabilitating the trail.
Right.
And so it's a bigger project, but it's a benefit to our residents as well.
So, yes, and we're connecting those. So for the street side, we have the Cheeksburg Road that, like I said earlier, it's gonna be under construction next fiscal year. We're looking maybe about a March letting date. This will be a part of a 90%, 10%, where the state matches 90%, we match 10%. And that portion is broken out there for you. It also includes design and other stuff as far as what the city's paying for. The flashing lights for pedestrian crossings, we're looking to spend $75,000 a year. We have identified how many crossing areas we have, mid-block crossing areas. And so we should be able to get all those areas with appropriate crossing areas in 3 years. So Glade Road, we're looking to start construction possibly depending on the outcome or the discussions we have with the COG, and I'll text that as well for fiscal year 20, and we'll be bringing that up and decide what we should do moving forward. Jackson Road Bridge renovation design, this is the one where TxDOT awarded us some grant money as well to do design and restore that bridge. And so we have to pay 10% of that. John McCain and Westcote Drive roundabout, so here we're looking at starting that construction. And same with Westcote and McDonald should time in together where they started and finished pretty much at the same time. LD Lockett Road, we're still looking into that, so we still have it in there. We may get it started, but it's, we still try to find some information before we get started on design. Pleasant Run Bridge at Big Bear and Whitechapel Bridge. So this is a project that South Lake has started. They got TxDOT money, and this is our contribution for our portion of it. It's $400,000. This project is set to take place next summer, and so they're planning to close that bridge down for about a year, which segues into Pleasant Run Road rehabilitation. One thing I want to discuss here in Pleasant Run Road, since we're doing the water line design and we're looking to get that into construction next fiscal year, we're going to try to, instead of just resurfacing it, maybe make it match to what we have on the south side from John McCain back down to Lockett, LD Lockett, and make sure that the ribbon curve and all keeps going up. One thing that I need for you guys to look at as well is also where I added an additional $500,000 for an underground storm sewer system and a sidewalk. And that's something that we may need to discuss if we want to go ahead and do that or not while we have that road closed in conjunction with the bridge. It seems like throughout my one-on-ones that some people wanted to see some trails, some wanted to see it underground storm sewer. So that's what it would take to get it all designed and matching the rest. So it's something we can.
You're talking about up to the bridge?
Yes.
Like up to the South Lake Bridge?
Right,
Are they
so-
putting in a sidewalk?
They are putting a sidewalk. We asked them
we
to
would be
move-
matching it?
So we would
Oh,
be
we're
matching.
continuing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So we
that-
connect to their bridge,
Okay.
and it will also match to the south side of what
Got
we
it.
just
That
put
there
in.
will be a walkway or trail space on the bridge.
Yes, yes, there will be. So that's why I put that money set aside there, because originally it was $350, but in discussion with everybody, it seemed like they wanted to see that go through. So that's locked in there for you guys. Roberts Road will hopefully be under construction. And then the State Highway 26 beautification project that you'll be hearing next is set at $9 million. Overall, we're looking to spend $13 million on that project. But for this fiscal year, we're looking to set aside $9 million. Then again, we're going back to the street maintenance with the county, where we pay $400,000 to contribute our portion for that. And then our local street maintenance program, which is the 2021, we set aside $500,000 for additional roads we'll do. And then the ongoing street pavement markings that we're gonna do annually. On the wastewater side, we have a portion on the west side of the city limits that sends our sewer to the city of Keller, and we reckon our fees with them through a spreadsheet. We kind of assume how much flow we're sending to them, and then we rectify that with them. What we're hoping to do is install this meter, have this meter designed and installed to where we know exactly what we're sending to them, and just paying that amount only. Back to the water side, we talked about the Pleasant Run water line and the vault that would be under construction. We talked about SCADA and then the water line projects for Tinker Roads that would later on lead on to maybe a full rehabilitation of Tinker Road as well. So that's a quick snapshot of all the projects for fiscal year 20. Again, we do have that, we will make that webpage go live so that you can drill more and have any questions regarding those projects, you can always bring them to my attention.
Good job, you did that.
Very good job.
At least we got about an hour and a half.
Yes.
What'd you say, Mayor?
I said, that was a good job, you did quick when we said initially looked at it.
Yeah, it was critical. Those other meetings were really critical.
Ray, has that website been launched, that actual?
Not yet,
Yeah.
yes, but I will launch it as soon as we get done.
Well, make sure that all those projects that you're identifying are approved as part of the budget, so.
Okay, so maybe hold on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can say the website launch it and say, you know,
Say not
tentative, but yeah, you gotta be real careful
Wait till it
because
Oh, yeah.
your
They'll
budget,
they'll nail it.
yeah.
Okay,
A lot of work to do here.
that's a lot of stuff, isn't it?
And if you look at all the 5-year plan, there's a lot of projects that continue out.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
A lot of activity.
Get all that done by December, they'll probably give you a
Yeah,
bonus.
they can't all be done. They won't all be done in 2020.
What year?
That's true. You didn't say what year, Dave. We'll give you a text that answer.
Those are the kind of people
It'll be done in
that
December.
sweep the floor.
Turned down.
Just don't know what year.
I have high expectations of this year.
Okay, so we'll go to agenda item 4, which we're looking for a date for a work session with Mesa regarding 26 design.
Yes,
You got
sir.
some dates?
At the council's priority and objective setting session a week or so ago, gosh, time flies, we talked about the desire to have a standalone work session evening to visit with them about design ideas. So in visiting with them, I think you all received the email where if you've got pictures or ideas of things you like, to send me those by the end of the week, I will be sharing those with them. We have a meeting set for next week with them to kind of go through all the pictures you sent and kind of how we structure that work session and where we take the conversation from here. And then we'd like to give them a few weeks following our meeting next week to then have that work session and make sure they've got some prepared, sketches and images and different ideas to share with you guys to be responsive to what you've indicated you'd like to see.
Are you getting what you're expecting? I mean.
I think I've heard from 2 or 3 of you so far. I did, yes. So with that, we're looking at an August date for Mesa for the standalone work session. And looking at city calendars, my calendar, I think I've met with Mayor to make sure he was available. I can kind of run through the date availability. I'll give you all the dates and we can kind of go one by one if you like. So we've got August 13th or 14th. And then I will.
This is evening, is that correct?
That's up to you. Yeah, I was assuming evening, but if we want to do it during the day, we certainly can. So 13th, 14th were 2 options, the 19th the following week, or the 27th and 28th. I'll tell you, one thing to consider is that the 13th is the CEDC work session evening. The 27th is the CEDC board meeting evening. So that could either be a pro or a con in your mind as to
We don't
whether-
have any of those on our calendar yet.
I don't believe so. I think those are on the budget calendar. I don't think they're on the Howlett calendar yet, but we'll have Christine send those out now that we're getting close.
Yes, that would be very helpful.
And so those CEDC meetings typically don't take longer than, 30 minutes to an hour max. I can't imagine them going longer
I
than
think it'd be
that.
great to layer it in with one of those. I mean, we're coming anyway.
So I think maybe we would just suggest having the CEDC meetings perhaps at like 5 so that we could be done and, post a Mesa meeting for a 5:30 or 6 o'clock start.
I think that's a good idea. Probably didn't come down on,
One less time we have to.
Yeah.
so 13th or
The
27th.
13th or the 27th, does anybody?
I'm good with both.
Like the 19th? 21st, I'm sorry. Well, 20th, 21st, something like that week. So the 27th, they'll be back in school. So we're here.
Okay, so
You're home.
it sounds like Chuck would prefer the 27th then. Does anybody else have a conflict with the 27th?
Not today.
What 27, August?
August.
This is during the day.
This was evening,
No.
unless you all decide otherwise. The CEDC board meeting will be evening because we've got citizens a couple of citizens that are on there, so it's typically held in the evening.
I'm good.
Yeah,
You say the CEDC is on 27th?
Bet it doesn't last long.
Yes, and we'll send those out.
I don't have it on my
Well,
calendar.
they send them out, yeah.
Not sent out yet.
Awesome.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we're zoomed in on 27th right now?
That's what I'm hearing.
In the evening, correct?
Yes. Very good. Okay, we're up to
Check,
5.
check.
Commission review the Tarzan gets Tarzan in. It was great.
Oh my God.
It was great.
We love it.
We had a couple of council members ask, and I thought it was a good point, that we want to get together and discuss the event and maybe highlight areas of positive and areas of concern while it's still fresh in our mind. One of the things we're going to have to do, I hope fairly quickly, is pick an act for next year, because we want to get that booked as soon as possible.
Yeah.
There are some challenges. The pricing is all over the place, and so too is the availability. And so that's something we'd like to have booked. Aaron, we talked maybe by November, I think, the latest. But there's a lot of negotiations back and forth, and there's a lot of discussion. But generally, this is an opportunity for you guys to offer commentary about what you liked and what you didn't like, and what else you would like to see in future events.
I thought it was outstanding.
Yeah, it was.
Definitely the best yet. A lot of the feedback I heard was just
Yeah,
praise.
all the feedback I got was the best yet. It was great.
And the attendance was
And that's
much
what's
higher.
good. We like the
Yeah.
fireworks.
The only
Yes.
thing that I thought maybe could be better is more trucks,
More food trucks.
more
yeah.
food
Oh,
trucks.
there's a
Because
line at
there were
that.
huge lines.
Nobody could even get the food.
Yeah, what we want to do next year is we want to send out a letter to all of the Colleyville businesses and invite them to participate. And even if they don't necessarily have a food truck,
You
but
don't
they
have to
have,
be food trucks.
right, they have an availability or a way to sell their product and expand that so that there's more inclusiveness of our businesses and prioritization of our businesses, but also more variety.
I agree.
I don't think we expected the turnout. I mean, we knew there would be a good turnout, but that was a huge turnout.
We expected a big turnout. What we did though is we focused on some of our areas that we spent a lot of time on behind the scenes with security, logistics
was
related
wonderful.
to how the crowd would be managed, and then of course concerns about the fireworks and the timing and everything like that. And so food trucks were kind of yes, they're a potential problem if we had a big crowd, but they weren't a high priority. Now that we've gotten really good at some of those basic elements, we can move on to the other areas.
Sure.
But certainly, food trucks are.
You could actually
Yeah.
split them and put them on both sides.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what if we
Blue
put some
lines
restaurants on the
should-
north side of Colleyville Center?
Absolutely.
Like,
We're looking at the same date, approximately the same weekend, because I think that was, I heard a lot of comments that people are glad we did it before 4th. We're not gonna go back to the
Yes,
4th.
we don't want to compete on the
No.
4th.
That's why I think we
There's way
had
too
such a
much
good
around
time.
that weekend.
Yes.
Is there a way to put a
So that's the
bridge across
27th?
that water anyway at all? Because that is
Not
a
easily, and
a temporary.
Which
that's one
water
of
are
the,
you talking about?
the pond.
Some between.
Yeah, because
We
people had to
You
go
have
all
to
the way
go to the
around.
entrance, but
Yeah, we've talked about
It's
actually
too expensive.
looking at the site logistics and questioning whether or not there's a way to turn the event or realign it. So all of those factors are part of that discussion that'll take place now. The first element we had to do was prove that we could do the fireworks, because we had concern about that.
That was amazing.
And prove that we could, get a good act and that people would come and they would draw. And so those two things, as long as the weather's good, those two things, we've got pretty good proof of concept on those. And so now it's a matter of, okay, tweaking the event logistics itself, because as much as we want to make sure we have a successful event, we also have a limitation on how many people we can handle. And so, I think for us, that 2,500 is probably 2,500 to 3,000 is where we were at. But if we get beyond 5,000, we've got a different problem. And so we've got to manage, and the way to do that is what you provide, and, the act and the time and date and all that kind of stuff and competition. And so
Weather.
we're looking at weather. Of course, weather's a big factor. So we're looking at all those factors.
Pushed the
but-
stage back just a little bit too. The year before was back a little further. Not much dance floor right out there, was there, Adrian?
Well, we've even talked about potentially, looking at it, you may move the stage altogether. You may, to accommodate the way the crowd's laid out or whatever, we don't know. And so we're gonna look at all of that as part of our discussion. But at the same time, we're looking at performers and the options there.
This looked pretty good. I looked at it several times, just thinking of how we could, and that's just my opinion only, but the way you set it up, we had the longest yard that way.
Yes.
Trying to split, then you got the river in the way, if you try to run off the north side or the south side.
Well, and the
Did
logistics.
we have more tables this year?
We did. We added more
I think so.
tables.
They added more tables.
We've talked about even adding more, and then the other thing is the fireworks. Logistics of the fireworks, they have to be placed in a certain area that will allow them to be.
seen.
To be seen, but also are safe. And so there's a fire circle that they have to determine, and so a lot of these things are moving parts, but certainly those are all things that are challenges for us.
it was wonderful, it really
What about Mr. fans of
Talked
some
about that,
sort?
cooling areas
Yeah.
and providing for, kind of like you saw the band had, you can rent the big cooling stations that will produce misting into
Right.
the crowd. Now, of course, the wind helps, and so if there's not a wind, people can go to that and cool off. The other thing we did this year, which was, I think, positive and would have been even more so if it was hotter, is we actually went out into the crowd and looked for people that we thought could use water instead of waiting for them to come. And so a lot of our public works people were out, they saw, an older couple or whatever, they'd ask them if you need water, and kind of being more proactive. And
was
so
great.
those things help as well. But, these are all part of that effort, and there was a whole lot of logistics behind the scene. The library team, the police, the fire, the public works,
Everybody did a
parks,
great
everybody.
job.
That's off the Mary.
Everybody did a
We
great
could
job.
even have water stations, like,
Oh, yeah.
we run marathons, they've got like
That's a
little,
great idea.
Yes.
little,
Did we
paper
actually
things
start
where
it?
you
Yeah,
know,
just
just
like a
The year
simple
before, was it
hydration.
started at 7 and this year it was at 8? I don't know why I was thinking it was at 7 o'clock before, which I like it better at 8 o'clock.
Yeah,
Because it
we
lets the sun go down behind the trees.
And we
What
also
about
had
an
time for
opening
fireworks
act
too.
of some sort, a
That
local?
was
I know
something
somebody
that
that will.
I suggested also was an opening act.
Yeah, an
Talked
opening
about
local,
that.
maybe
That'd be
local.
fun, a local, yeah.
We talked about that, we talked about either a DJ or an actual opening act that performs. Sometimes when you have multiple musicians, you gotta be logistically figure
Got a
that
mouse
out.
there, too.
But those are good problems to have. The other thing was the challenge was the fireworks. We wanna make sure that we had darkness for the fireworks.
Yeah.
And so that was timing, that dictated when
You gotta change out all
It
the.
was wonderful.
The only thing on the fireworks, they were beautiful. The sound went from like a really nice level to like blast out your eardrums during the fireworks. So if we could just get that back down to,
Well, and
the
some of
concert level
that's-
was great. It was just during the fireworks, you couldn't even like hear yourself think.
And that's some of the questions
Yeah,
about
crazy.
logistics and
People
using whose
didn't-
equipment.
People didn't care because of fireworks.
My whole table was complaining about it.
Were
We
they?
were having a great time with the fireworks, but everyone was like, I cannot hear, so
Yeah, you
just
were-
some feedback.
Bring
Yeah.
some earmuffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are in front of the speaker too, so.
We were in
Yeah,
front of
we
the
were
speaker.
right in
I
front of the
mean,
speakers.
but during the concert, it was totally fine, so
Yeah, the
it was a
concert
difference in sound.
performance was fantastic. They did
amazing.
a great job
Well,
on
Amazing.
The only
providing
thing,
it.
if you could do get an opening act, just beware that you'll have to change out all the equipment on top. That,
And
that's
for
what I'm
sound
afraid of.
systems. you
That's
can't
why I
do that.
prefer to go with a DJ or something that just can plug into a board, but those are things we can look at.
Say, those guys run, $100,000 boards. They're gonna be
Yes.
moving back and forth and stuff like that, so
I get it.
it's gonna be tricky.
And the other thing too is if we had good weather, but if you have people baking for 4.5 hours, it's tough
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And so you gotta be careful of, how do you do that? And some of those things are the questions. And then, of course, the type of act, are the two acts complementary? And so if you have a DJ, you can play music that is complementary regardless of who the act is, because, you have a theme. So if you have a country act, you may have country advanced music.
Are
but-
we looking at keeping it country, or were you
There
looking
not
at
be-
switching
Well,
out?
those are the kinds of questions
Why
you
would there
guys.
be
Oh,
anything
for the
but
Oak Ridge
country?
boys.
I like the Oak Ridge boys.
They'd be
I don't even
great.
know.
Yeah, they're great.
An old school.
Yeah.
Can we do what we
Before I
did
thought,
last time? Didn't we all give a
Yeah.
few
Yes,
suggestions?
and we're working on a
Exactly.
list that we're gonna get you that shows you kind of the
Okay.
prices. And we'll,
It's just easy.
and we'll have a lot of choices. And so,
No, but,
So you're gonna give us some choices?
yes, we'll get you some choices coming out in the next month. or
It
so.
really was.
There's a lot of, and the other thing too, don't forget, just because a band is the right price, doesn't mean they're available in the area.
Right.
Of course.
And so we got a good deal because between
Yeah, all
acts,
the- maybe
the
I
region.
didn't
It's
know.
just reminding every song.
brings back so many memories.
So if we can nail it down.
Yes. We saw two different, like Pat Green, we've seen two different prices. I've seen one price range, it was 25 to 35, and another that was like 40 to 75. And so you don't really know until you get Pat
From
Green.
him, from his crew, or what do you mean?
No, what it is there's these booking agencies that all are quoting these rough prices because they may not have that act as part of their portfolio, or they may, and so they're pricing you different. And so these are generalities we're getting prices on. Once we hone down into the actual acts we want to choose, then we got to go out and contact their actual agent to get a deal. But like Pat Green was surprising that it was that
That'd be
diverse of a number, and in one example, that low. And so if he's playing in this region a week before and week after, and he's passing through, you may get a better price than if he's, in southern
California.
Texas or.
Isn't he local?
He is more local, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But he also plays other festivals in the area, and so they may have a premium, and if they're charging admission, they may have a prohibition on him playing in the region within a certain period of time.
That's what happened to
Like what
Kenny.
we had this year.
That Clint
Mark
Black,
Chestnut.
Mark Chestnut and Clint Black both had issues with that last year, yeah.
We'll start looking, see if we can be the first on the
Yep.
list.
So if you guys have ideas, just keep them coming. Erin loves it. We've been hitting her with ideas. We've just been burying her with ideas, and some of the acts, she says, I've never heard of them. And we actually.
Like, give us one.
Like the Oak Ridge Boys. She never heard of the Oak Ridge Boys.
I've never heard of them.
We had a.
So, I am, but I'm really bad about, even when we go to Billy Bob's, I'm really bad about not knowing who sings what. So I may know their songs, but, oh, yeah. But I mean, I don't know like their whole album. I mean, I know one song.
There seems to be a theme with youth, so I wish I didn't know what they were.
Okay.
I know that look.
Are we done with that?
That's a mystery.
Okay. All right.
Moving right along.
For your hard work.
Yeah, that was great. Everybody did a super
Everybody did
job.
Chief Cantrell and Chief Miller did an absolutely outstanding job in
Everybody
planning. I went over and met with them both, and it really was
amazing.
very, very impressive how they were handling that
And
behind the
everybody worked
scenes.
hard.
Outstanding.
did.
Yeah, everybody.
They got that pulled down quick, and everybody was helping.
Well,
Okay.
and all the setup and all that stuff.
Yeah, the next one.
And tear it down.
That'll work.
Couldn't tell
I mean,
him.
they're so.
Just a quick summary, we used hotel hot tax money for this is the hotel occupancy tax. We used it for this entire event, so that's really what it's intended for. And so it's a great example of bringing marketing and economic development
Absolutely.
together into a event for the community.
So we moved to agenda item 6, regular agenda items. The only comment I have, we have a table item that was 8A, and we will leave it on the table. We'll probably expect that to come off the table at the next meeting. They're still working on it. Other than that, I think that's it. Any other-
One item, will the 26 discussion be where it is in the
Yes.
schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
Why did you think that was a problem? You thought it needed to be moved
No,
up?
I don't, well, I bet you there are a lot of people here tonight.
Well, it's right up,
For
right
that.
after consent,
Oh, is it?
right after consent,
Oh, okay.
item 5.
So it's not.
Very good. Okay.
Consent has several items, but it's still.
Well, there's a work state. Yeah. Okay,
Okay,
gotcha.
anything else? No, that should be where I need to be. And we will close the work session at 6:00. Good, and we will be moving into executive session in accordance with Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Subchapter D, Section 551.071 legal, Section 551.072 real estate, and Section 551.087 economic development. So we're now in executive session.
Hey, there's a new system that I just bought for my construction site. It's called Arlo. And these cameras are about $400 a piece. But you can stick them